From inside the warehouse on a frigid November day, it is the MASN All Access Podcast. Paul Mancano, Bobby Blanco, the MASN All Access Podcast, brought to you by Marymount University. Visit MarymountSaints.com to learn more about our student athletes and programs today. It has been a long layoff for the MASN All Access Podcast, at least on the Orioles side.
Yep.
It was a long October for you boys here. Covering the Nationals. We won't talk about that, but we will get into some great Orioles talk today. It's good to be back behind the mics talking O's, Bob.
Yeah, thank God that MLB has this kind of unspoken rule, no news until after the World Series, because we would be woefully behind.
Yeah,
we would be doing Orioles podcasts from Nats Park, Minute Maid Park, St. Louis. I mean, it was a crazy month, a lot of fun, but yeah, thank God, no breaking Orioles news, and we are kind of all caught up. Thank God for Rocco Botko's blog as well. Kind of reading that every day keeps you on top of things, and you can tell even he is just, all right, I need something newsworthy. I'm just churning out the same old numbers day in and day out now. But it's good to be back talking about the O's. Good to see all these bobbleheads back on the table. Good to be in studio. We haven't done an in studio podcast in a month. All of our other podcasts have been on the road. It's the comfort of home almost back here in the studio.
Our web studio was dilapidated and disregarded for a long amount of time.
Yes.
It needed to be cleaned. It was cleaned. Yes. Glad we got that done.
Yes.
We had no part in that, but
thank you to everyone who did help with that. Yeah, and it looks completely different. I walked in for the first time in a month. Keep in mind, we're not a month, and I was like, this is totally different. It looks beautiful. It's glorious.
It is glorious. Yeah, finally, we're getting a little bit of news. Thank God the Orioles didn't have the offseason that they had last offseason, this offseason. They had to totally remake a front office and hire a manager and all that stuff. But they have a pretty boring one so far. But could have some interesting stuff down the road. We're going to talk about later on in the podcast, perhaps if there need to be any free agency moves made. If so, what positions would the Orioles target? But first, Bobby, I think we can start with looking back, because it has been over a month, but we need to reflect just a little bit on the 2019 Orioles season. Yeah,
kind of bear with us as we try to piece together what happened over the season. I haven't thought about Orioles baseball in that month since we did our last podcast. Yeah, well, that's not true. Orioles fans, look at Rock's blogs. People are tuned in, so it's just oh yeah, that stuff happened. This happened. I think we would be remiss if we didn't start off this podcast, our first in a month, without giving kudos to John Means for finishing second in the American League Rookie of the Year voting. To me, that's I was almost taken aback. Great being a finalist. For the fact that he finished second, obviously Yordan Alvarez, the unanimous Rookie of the Year, and we saw him up close and personal in the World Series. Man, that guy is going to be a force to be reckoned with in Houston for a long time.
He's a stud.
But I'm in the camp where it is difficult for a pitcher to beat out position players for awards like this. That's why we have an MVP and a Cy Young. That's why we have a Cy Young, because it's just difficult. It's so rare that pitchers beat out position players. And the fact that John Means, I don't think anyone predicted him to be the winner to finish with the award, but I think that he finished second, and by a pretty good margin over Brandon Lowe of the Rays. Shout out to the University of Maryland. But John Means, a heck of a season, finished second. That is, I was not completely taken aback, but I was like, that is one hell of a way to cap off a hell of a rookie season. And then on top of that, he also got married over the weekend. Yeah. So had a couple good days in the John Means camp.
Yeah, Austin Hayes did too. So congratulations to those two guys.
A couple of young birds getting hitched.
This is the prime time to do it. November. Their World Series run would have in theory been over, and looking forward to the offseason. But yeah, John Means finishing second for Rookie of the Year. Nice. All-Star appearance earlier on in the year, as we know. Couldn't get into that game, but a Rookie of the Year, finishing in the top three and finishing second, considering this is a guy that was not expected to make the team coming out of camp. I remember talking to Rock in spring training, and he was saying this guy, John Means, who has always been around but has never been discussed. He was in the minor leagues at Bowie for 3 straight years, never expected to make that jump. And in his age 25, 26 season, he does, and he makes that jump to be one of the better starters rookie starters in baseball. So congratulations to John Mean, at least for getting close. There are no, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, but also in AL Rookie of the Year voting.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think anyone would beat Alvarez. Not many people expected him.
He hit over 300, I think.
And I didn't realize he did it in like 80. Like, he did it in very few games.
Yeah.
Which is impressive in and of itself. But again, I'm just definitely in that camp where it is just hard for pitchers to beat out position players because position players are playing every day. And I guess you got to take that with a grain of salt with how few outings that pitchers usually get during the course of a season. And the fact that John Means was only second, but second by a good margin. He got 10 more second place votes than Brandon Lowe did. I mean, that's to me, and think about it too. Alvarez and Lowe were both part of playoff teams, and obviously the Orioles were not a playoff team this season. And the fact that John Means, some people might have thought, oh, well, he's obviously have a great season, but let's just throw him on the ballot, just to give the Orioles some saving grace. No, he went out and he competed and finished second. And it's not it wasn't just I didn't think it was any either, but it wasn't just like a pity. Voting. It was he was the second best rookie in the American League this year, and it reflected. Other people in baseball across the country noticed.
I know wins don't really matter in baseball anymore. They're not. They're just a stat to throw out there, but they don't really mean anything. Mm-hmm. But that being said, when you're on a team that doesn't win many games, that loses over 100 games, it's kind of impressive when you do pick up some wins. Yeah. I know luck is a factor, but John Means finished with a winning record. He finished with 12 wins. More than Max Scherzer, he was injured, but still, he's in the Cy Young voting.
Right.
Trevor Bauer, Jacob deGrom, and Noah Syndergaard.
Yeah.
That's just kind of crazy to think about. Now, obviously, the Mets are the Mets, and they're just never going to back deGrom for whatever reason. But the fact that he was able, the fact that he was able to get that many wins, he weirdly enough, doesn't count for the. If he had a great enough ERA, he would not be in the running for the ERA title.
Right.
You need one inning pitched for every one of your team's games, and he finished with 155 innings pitched, so he's just shy.
7 short.
Yeah, which is kind of a strange rule, but that's what the qualifications are. But his 3.60 ERA would have been 24th in all of baseball. That's ahead of Aaron Nola, Julio Teheran, Max Fried, Zach Wheeler, Yu Darvish, Noah Syndergaard, Masahiro Tanaka. Just some of the better names in the starting pitching in baseball.
Yeah, he just needed 7 more innings to finish 7th in the American League or in the ERA. And you mentioned going back to training camp and how he kind of came out of nowhere. He developed this changeup, and we talked about it multiple times over the course of the season. First of all, before the changeup, he had an uptick in velocity, so he had stuff that could eventually play in the big leagues. And then he developed this changeup that was just lethal, and he really fed off that throughout the course of the season. And guys, obviously being a rookie, hitters not having seen him before, he was able to fool guys easily with a fastball that can play at this level, and then this nasty changeup that can just drop. And in terms of, and they look the same coming out of his hand. He was able to fool hitters easily with the pitch that he developed in spring training. Like you said, he came out of nowhere. He was a minor league guy for the course of the season. I think there's also a story where he was kind of maybe close to calling it quits, right?
He was, yeah. And in the offseason, he made a LinkedIn profile.
And then he had this awesome spring training, and it became a story where like, oh, this guy's having a good spring training. Possibly we'll see him up in the big leagues. Oh, he broke with the team with the camp, and now he's in the running to be the opening day starter in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at this point, assuming they're not going to make any major changes to their pitching staff, which I think most people would not foresee, I think he's got the inside track right now. Yeah. He did have a rough ERA after the All-Star break, 4.85, so maybe hitters were starting to get a little bit more in tune with his changeup and starting to figure out that pitch. But he did finish with a 3.82 ERA in the month of September. So not all bad to close the year. And, of course, he has an offseason to make adjustments and get his arsenal up and ready. Now he is a full offseason, which most minor leaguers don't have.
Right. I was going to say, that you can also attribute that second half ERA kind of ticking up a little bit to fatigue, probably. What hasn't used to being pitched at this level for this long.
Right. And now he'll have, a lot of minor leaguers have to go to Arizona Fall League, and they have to go to various camps and clinics and all kinds of stuff to get themselves right. But he will be he's got that inside track right now. That is him getting second in AL Rookie of the Year is a perfect transition to what I think we can do, which is hand out some awards on the 2019 Orioles. and give them some. There we go. Yeah, like
some
a
hardware.
Dundee.
Yeah, kind of like the Dundies.
Yeah,
the MASN All Access.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. You know what I was going for.
Yeah, the Bobbies and Paulies.
Yeah.
Some awards for the season, just because it is awards season, and we'll just relegate it to the Orioles in particular. Say they start at the most important position. We start at MVP with the most important award. I think we'll give Manager of the Year to Brandon Hyde. I think he's got that locked up.
Yeah.
MVP.
Hold on. Well, Brandon Hyde got kicked out a couple of games, so it wasn't a unanimous running.
Oh, true.
Yeah, there was other people on the ballot. MVP. I think I'm going to assume that we both agree on this one with Trey Mancini. I think that's a pretty easy one. The guy, you talk about the numbers are there too. We've harped on the 2-week struggle he had in the end of June, beginning of July, but then since then was just lights out. He was at one point on pace to get like 40 home runs. I think he ended up with 35, 34.
35, yeah.
So just an outstanding season statistically, and then also think about what he meant to this team off the field. We talked about it so many times about how he just really took up that mantle of being the leader of this team, the captain, and he was kind of thrust into that role with this whole rebuilding, revamping of the whole organization thing. And so I think on and off the field, Trey Mancini, when it comes to being the most valuable, it's hands down him.
Yeah, I think no question. He hit 291 with those 35 homers, as you mentioned, came 3 RBI short of 100, slugged .535 with an .899 OPS, came 1,000, 1 millionth?
1,000?
1,000. Okay. Away from a 900 OPS. Really, the only guy to have a 900 OPS in the last several years for the Orioles is Manny Machado.
Yeah.
So that's pretty hard to do. So all of those numbers are career highs, with the exception of the average because he had that crazy rookie year. So really impressive stuff from Trey Mancini. I mean, he did have some tough stretches. His batting average kind of dipped and soared. It was a kind of roller coaster for his batting average throughout the year. But consistently, he was drawing more walks than he ever has in his career. He was hitting more homers than he ever has in his career. And on a lineup where they didn't have to pitch to him, they could have avoided him every time and still probably gotten away with it. He was raking.
Yeah, and I think if we're going to give out a little maybe honorable mentions for this reward, I think you have to talk about Jonathan VR. Yeah, how he ended up. He at one point was leading this team in home runs. I think he finished with 24. He played 162 games, and if your best ability is your availability. So, him being able to go out there every single day and perform, and we talked about his versatility on defense, being able to play multiple positions in the infield. He stole 40 bases. I mean, this guy had a solid season too. So, I mean, I think unanimously we're giving the most valuable Oriole to Trey Mancini, who was voted the most valuable Oriole. But Jonathan VR should not go overlooked too. He had himself a solid season as well.
And considering his defensive statistics, he actually had a higher Baseball Reference and I think maybe a higher Fangraphs WAR than Trey Mancini.
He definitely on Baseball Reference. I'm looking at it right now. He's got a 4 and Trey was a 3.3.
Right. So, yeah, VR certainly kind of almost weirdly flew under the radar. But in addition, the amount of bases that he was stealing, I think he was kind of allowed to play free this year.
Yeah.
And he made the most of it. So VR and Mancini, Mancini gets the award. VR gets second place votes.
Yeah.
From us. Cy Young. Let's talk about some Cy Young. We kind of mentioned him earlier. I think we're going to have a unanimous pick for this one as well.
Yeah. It's got to be John Means. I mean, we're just talking about Baseball References WAR calculations. John Means led the Orioles with a 4.6 WAR, and like kind of going back to like pitchers versus position players. That's difficult for a pitcher to lead a team in WAR, just because again there's a lot less volume of games. So the fact that he was able to go out there and take him being a rookie out there, that's a great story in and of itself. But we're just talking about the best pitcher on the staff. He was the one solid, consistent starter that this team had, and that's something that they've been needing for a couple of years now. Just the consistency. We talked about how Alex Cobb, again injured, had an injury-plagued season. Andrew Cashner found his groove and then was traded off to the Red Sox. John Means was out there consistently and getting innings and outs throughout a consistent basis more than any other pitcher that the Orioles have seen over the past handful of seasons. He had one of the lowest ERAs since I think Wei Chen from a starting pitcher, in the past couple of years. So by far the most consistent and the best pitcher on this pitching staff.
It is crazy to think. I was just thinking about, you mentioned that the dearth of great starting pitchers that the Orioles have had in recent years. That has always been their fatal flaw. As they made the playoffs in 12 and 14 and 16, they still never had an ace through that time period, and it's amazing that they were able to get that far without that. But you think about how far would those teams be able to go if they had a John Means, especially a lefty. That's one thing that they really struggled with, was getting a good left-handed starting pitcher on their staff. It's kind of a shame, because you think if they had gotten this version of John Means 3 years ago, this might be they might have gotten themselves back to the ALCS or even further than that.
Yeah, maybe I'll correct myself. That stat I saw might have been he had the lowest ERA from a left-handed starting pitcher for the Orioles since Wei and Chen. But yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and this is now someone that the Orioles can build this rotation around. And for a long time, we thought that was going to be Dylan Bundy and Kevin Gausman, possibly Hunter Harvey, who has now maybe found himself a spot in the bullpen permanently. So the fact that it's great, obviously, that they have a guy like that, but that he came under the radar and just really snuck in there and kind of stole this spotlight, this job of being the ace of the staff. Not really a job, but you know what I mean. I think it helps out guys like Michael Elias so much. Like that's one less thing he needs to worry about moving forward in this whole rebuild process, is finding a starter for the top of the staff for the long term. He's a rookie. He's going to be here for the long term. You're not going to trade this guy away. You're not going to, he's your homegrown kid.
Yeah.
He's not like a Trey Mancini, who has a couple years under his belt, who might have a lot of value right now that you can get for assets. He is your asset. He is your main asset right now, because he's a young starting pitcher who has proven to be can be a staple in this rotation and be your frontline guy.
And it's crazy to think you mentioned Gausman and Bundy, because those two were always expected. If it wasn't going to be one, it was going to be the other. That was going to be the ace of the staff. Gausman, had shown flashes but was mostly inconsistent. But Bundy has never had an ERA under 4. John Means in his first full season just got an ERA at 3.60. So pretty crazy to think that this guy really, truly came out of nowhere and was the ace of this staff. All right, so MVP to Trey, Cy Young to John Means. Let's go to a most improved player. I don't know if this is not an official award. I think this is an award.
It's like a MLB Network award or something.
Yeah.
Or I guess it's a comeback player.
Is there an NBA most improved player? I think so, right?
Possibly. I
think so.
What's are we doing?
We'll do a most improved and a comeback.
So let's
throw them both out there.
What's the difference?
I think comeback is you had to really struggle and then come back. Most improved, I think, is you've never really shown much, but this could be your breakout year.
Okay.
So slight difference. But I'll start with most improved. I'm going to give it to Hanser Alberto. His career numbers before he came to the Orioles: 3 seasons, 89 games, a career 192 average, 0 homers, and just 6 extra base hits with Texas. 2019 season, 139 games, 305 batting average, 12 homers, 26 doubles, 2 triples. An absolute breakout year for Hanser Alberto, to the point where I saw Baseball America, who predicts years down the line, the Orioles 2023 lineup, I think it was, and they still had Hanser Alberto in there.
Oh, I saw that,
amongst guys like Ryan Mountcastle and, their starting pitcher, I think,
Yusniel Diaz.
Yeah. So he has all of a sudden turned himself into a very useful piece, much like John Means. An incredible breakout season, again, that we did not see coming from this guy.
Yeah, a guy who hit over 300 is always going to... And a guy that, signed in spring training and, I think
they released him at one point and brought him back.
He was just a piece holder. He was supposed to be just a guy that, all right, we just need to get... we need someone to throw out there. We just need someone to... maybe he's a left-handed hitter. He can maybe hit pretty well.
Picked off waivers on January 11th. But he was... by the Orioles from the Yankees. Then on February 22nd, the Giants took him from the Orioles off waivers. And then on March 1st, a week later, the Orioles took him back from the Giants.
Wow. Okay. So he kind of bounced around. He's, again, a guy that really couldn't find a landing spot and then just proved himself to deserve to be here. And the Orioles this year were that team that, if you needed a chance, come here and play, because you'll have an opportunity to play and prove yourself. And Hanser Alberto, I think we talked about this at the end of the season. He was just one of those guys that took the opportunity and ran with it because he just showed he needed a consistent opportunity to play day in and day out, whether in the field or at the plate, and he proved not just suitable, but exceeded expectations on both sides and was able to be a reliable guy for Brennan High, especially at the top of the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, a guy that he crushed lefties, as we know. And if he can just hit righties a little bit more, if he can be a little bit more patient, he's pretty much an ideal a leadoff hitter, if not a number 2, because he proved himself just about everywhere. Was called on one of the many guys on this team that was called on to play multiple positions on this team, did serviceable at those. So to me, Hanser Alberto, a guy that we really did not see coming, earning a starting spot going forward. And
also a guy that kind of goes under the radar, but should be magnified in this day and age in baseball, doesn't strike out too much. In over almost 140 games and over 500 plate at bats, he only struck out 50 times.
Yeah.
And comparing to guys like Trey Mancini and VR, who they struck out well over 100 times, in some cases over 150 times. So that's really impressive that he puts the ball in play. Yeah. And we've heard many managers, especially in this day and age with analytics stuff, just put the ball in play. Don't strike out. Put the ball in play and see what happens, and then you'll get on base. And I think that really helps his. He doesn't have that strong of a. Oh wait, 329. That's not terrible.
Yeah,
but
and those 12 homers. I mean, they don't jump out to you, but that's about the minimum you need to be a major leaguer at this point. I mean, it's like everybody's
the ball will fly.
Yeah, everybody's hitting like 25 a year. So for him to be able to show at least that he has a little bit of pop. I mean, he only had 6 extra base hits in 89 games prior to this. So the fact that he had 12 homers showed that he can take the ball out of the ballpark helps a little bit. So my most improved player goes to Hanser Alberto. I think we could turn. Do you have a different candidate?
Yeah, you're not going to get me to argue against that too much. Maybe I'll just throw an honorable mention, and I think it's just it's not a recency effect. I think it's just that we've seen this guy play for a couple years now. Pedro Severino.
Yeah.
The guy who came from the Nationals, he never really had an opportunity to be the full-time starter there. It was kind of a revolving door of veteran catchers over in D.C. with Wilson Ramos, Matt Wieters, Jose Lobaton. And then he comes here, and within the first handful of games, he hit more home runs than he ever had in D.C. combined, and he played consistently here. I think he was just, he wasn't terrific by any means. He wasn't, one of the best catchers, but he was just given, like Hanser Alberto, given the opportunity to play every day and contribute. And, he hit 249, almost 250. That's not terrible for a catcher in 96 games, and then was able to get 13 home runs and 44 RBIs. I feel like he also had a couple of really big moments too, a couple of big at bats and some key spots, and there, few big Orioles games that they ended up winning. So I think just having seen him play throughout his career locally, to see him come here and just kind of get a change of pace, a fresh start, was able to him become an improved player, rejuvenate himself a little bit.
And his caught stealing numbers were not great this year, 24%, but I feel like he showed a little bit defensively too, that I had never really noticed about his game. I think he made some strides throughout the season. Yeah. We know the coaching staff worked with these guys defensively more than maybe any coaching staff in baseball because of the amount of time that they had them taking grounders, which you never see before a game. The amount of times we saw them working with the catchers, with Severino and Austin Wynns doing pop-up drills behind the plate. I feel like he made strides defensively and showed, and your numbers really don't have to light up the stat page if your offensive numbers if you're a catcher. So,
right, yeah.
So any of that stuff is just a bonus. But he showed that he can be a serviceable catcher behind the plate.
And this, there's no way to quantify this, but the energy he brought to this team. I mean, it's a young roster. We saw a lot of him, show his passion and, his youthfulness out on the field and how excited he got at, fist pump with the strikeout or a fist pump after throwing someone out at second. I think that helped kind of spark the team too, especially when you're losing as much as the Orioles did, it's kind of hard to keep that, fire in your belly and go in and day out. And I think Pedro Severino helped that along the way through a tough season.
Definitely some second place votes for Severino. Comeback player of the year. I've got an interesting candidate here, Bobby.
Okay.
My vote goes to Andrew Cashner.
Oh, all right.
You might remember he had a pretty down 2018, a historically down by his standards 2018, a 5.29 ERA. He gave up 25 homers. He was giving up 10 hits per 9. He had a 1.58 whip, which is brutal. All of those numbers were career worsts for him. He did not look like the guy that they had signed, that they hoped they were going to get when they signed in spring training before that 2018 season. He was kind of one of the guys that wasn't blamed per se, but was a factor in that terrible 2018 season that nobody really saw coming. Completely different 2019 with the Orioles. In those 17 starts with the O's before he was traded, he had a 3.83 ERA. He had a 6.2 strikeouts per 9, which is not a very high number, but it was his highest rate since 2016, so he was missing more bats than he ever had. And it was good enough to get him traded to the Red Sox for a couple of 17-year-olds down in the Dominican Summer League. And to make it all better, he had a 6.20 ERA with the Red Sox. So not only did he help the Orioles, but he hurt the Red Sox.
Yeah, he gave his best innings to the Orioles. Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at. We do have to take these awards with a little, I guess grain of salt. Yeah, but so because it was a tough season. So yeah, you give an award to a guy who he gave his most value because he became tradable, and you got something for him, and it ended up being the only trade the Orioles made in season. So that's a funny way to look at it. Yeah, Andrew Cashner, he struggled out of the gate, I believe, but so did everybody except for John Means, and also to take into account that Alex Cobb never got right and didn't pitch for the season. The fact that Andrew Cashner then 2 years ago, the Orioles brought in these two veteran pitchers to kind of carry the load on the starting rotation, and that never obviously came to fruition. The fact that Andrew Cashner was then, again, without Alex Cobb, was able to, churn in a quality start here and there and become valuable for the Orioles to get someone in return is an interesting way to look at the comeback player of the year.
And especially considering how bad he was the second half of the year for the Red Sox, the fact that the Orioles got two guys out of this, really pretty much regardless of how these guys turn out, Elio Prado and Nolberth Romero were the two guys. So they were 17 at the time of the trade. They're a ways away, right, if they ever make it. But the fact that the Orioles got anything for Cashner was a stroke of luck. The fact that all of those good starts just happened to be with the Orioles. I don't even know if he had a quality start with the Red Sox. He was getting hit around every time he went out, really, for the Red Sox. But good for Cashner for at least, and them trading him, I will say it was absolutely the right move to get anything back. But I know Brandon Hyde did miss a little bit of his leadership. So he showed that he could be a leader on a team like that, where he was showing guys how to do things, how to pitch at a major league level for a lot of guys that had never had that experience before.
Yeah, and Andrew Cashner even mentioned that on his way out, I guess. But he's going to miss this club. He didn't really want to leave, but he understood why he was being traded, because he liked kind of being the veteran and the role he was thrust into that rotation of being, the guy that these young pitchers look up to and helping them guide them through the early parts of their career. Before we move on, I'm going to throw two names at you. I'm not going to argue against Andrew Cashner. I wasn't thinking about that because now comeback player of the year, I'm thinking of somebody who was hurt.
Okay.
But year before. Yeah. And two names come to mind, Austin Hayes and Hunter Harvey. Guys that, have been, especially Hunter Harvey, but Austin Hayes too, now the past couple seasons, have been names that Orioles fans know very well throughout the minor league system, but just weren't able to break through because of various injuries and setbacks and stuff. Austin Hayes coming up and hitting above just in a small sample size, but hitting above 300. His glove was fantastic in center field. He made some of the most memorable plays of this season are the catches he made at the wall, diving catches in center. Yeah, the last month of the season. And then Hunter Harvey finally breaking through and making the major league roster, being brought up to Baltimore and being an absolute stud out of the bullpen, and a bullpen that needed arms. We have listed on here reliever of the year, and that's going to be a tough award to dish out because this bullpen struggled so much this season. But Hunter Harvey coming in, again, limited sample size, but was being able to touch 100 and strike guys out in big spots and eat innings for this bullpen that weren't being able to get out of in earlier parts of the season. And for him to overcome all the setbacks that he's had and all the pressure he's had for being a top prospect in this farm system for so long, to not only make it to the major leagues but find success is a pretty good story for him.
I don't think it can be overstated how impressive it is just to get there. I mean, the fact that, it's a story somewhat like Dylan Bundy's from a few years ago, but his injury list, Harvey's, seems to be even longer than Bundy's was. It would be great and awesome, and I'm rooting for him to be able to be a piece of the future going forward and a good, solid pitcher. But just the fact that he got here and he succeeded in the small amount of time that he was here was incredibly impressive. I mean, to make his way all the way back and to get that call up, I mean, that's a moment that will make a guy's career.
Yeah.
So incredibly impressive. Great submission there, Bob.
Thank you. And Rakabaka wrote a couple of days ago on the blog about how Harvey probably has found himself a solid place in that bullpen.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Gold Glove / Defensive Player of the Year. Another tough one.
Yeah.
But there are a few candidates that I think that we can consider for this. My mind immediately went to Richie Martin Jr.
Correct. Mine too.
Then I looked up his fan graphs and defensive stats.
Numbers weren't there?
They're not there. -8 defensive runs saved, -4.2 ultimate zone rating, 2.7 error runs, which is not good. It basically is the number of runs above or below average that a fielder is based on his number of errors. So he's giving up 2.7 runs. Strangely, he just wasn't there. And he did make some spectacular plays at short, but apparently, according to the numbers, they didn't quite match up with the eye test. He did make 10 errors, I believe, at shortstop, spent the entire season at shortstop. They didn't try him out at any other positions. He has the speed. I think he has the arm to play that position. But for whatever reason, it didn't. The numbers don't quite match what we seem to see, which was an above-average shortstop.
Yeah, it was. All right, let's go back to the taking this with a grain of salt because who else was going to play shortstop? Jonathan Villar was over there a handful of times as well, but you really kind of needed him at second base because while Hanser Alberto was serviceable at second base, Villar was just better.
Yeah.
And again, Richie Martin was up here because of his defense. And obviously the Rule 5 status, he needed to stay with the Major League Club roster for the entire season, and then he's obviously going to start next year in the minor leagues, probably throughout the whole season. But his defense was not only what kept him on the roster, but kept him in the field. He played a handful of games, and I think I'm going to go Richie for this award just based on volume. The fact that he played so many games, and that it was his defense that kind of not forced Brandon Hyde, but allowed Brandon Hyde to put him out there as often as he did. I kind of going back to like the Buck Showalter way of thinking, all his numbers are great, but the eye test for me, he made some really tough plays that rookies, especially at shortstop, don't often make. And it was impressive to see, I'm not comparing him to a Manny Machado, but you haven't seen a young guy flash like that in the infield of the Orioles since Manny Machado. And it was like, wow, this guy can develop into a really good defensive player at some point in his career.
This is an interesting dichotomy because you're going with the more eye test scouting, and I'm going to go with the more computer stats. The new age.
I feel like that's usually how we do this.
Yeah, this is the struggle that is at the core of baseball itself. I looked into who had positive defensive stats on the Orioles. Rio Ruiz was a candidate for me. He had 2 defensive runs saved at third, 3.2 defensive ratings according to Fangraphs, and a 1.8 ultimate zone rating. All those numbers are pretty good. But to me, Hanser Alberto had a 4 ultimate zone rating, 5 defensive runs saved, a 5 defensive rating according to Fangraphs. All of those were the best on the Orioles. He played 90 games at second base. He played 66 at third base and 4 games when he was pressed into service in the outfield. He was versatile. He was best at second as opposed to anywhere else. I got to go with Hanser Alberto. Gets my defensive player of the year.
He definitely made a lot of good. And again, back to my comment earlier, I wasn't like putting down Hanser Alberto's performance. It's just that I think the Orioles were on the eye test were best defensively with Richie at short and Jonathan Villar at second. Rio Ruiz is a good pull because I think there were a couple balls down the line that he made some diving plays that now I also feel like maybe most of his blunders came on the base paths. He played solid defense. So that's a good submission as well. And again, Hanser Alberto, I guess the numbers back him up.
I mean, he made some great plays. He did make some questionable plays. And I think, when I think also of his defense, I think of some of the blunders he made in the 4 games he was in the outfield because he was totally out of position there.
Yeah.
But he made the regular play pretty consistently.
He did. He made the regular play, and that's all you need. Just make the plays you're supposed to make. And then also, if I recall, he turned a couple really good double plays, I think especially later in the season at second base, like some diving stops and getting the ball to second to get over to first base as well. So, yeah, Hanser Alberto definitely. To me, it's just if a guy is, take out the rule. If a guy's in the line, Rule 5, we've seen Rule 5 players be on this roster and not play before because, all they need is be on the roster. You don't have to necessarily play him. But for Richie Martin to start as many games as he did at shortstop, and the way his bat struggled, he played solid enough defense where, he's kind of my best defensive player. And we're not even talking about the outfielders. Can we talk about Austin Hayes again?
Oh,
because, those plays, they immediately jump to my mind, too. The diving plays, the plays at the wall, the let's go gifts that we have. I mean, it's just... is there a defensive player of the year asterisk, highlight player of the year? It seemed like every time that kid was out there in center field, he was making highlight reel catches.
He actually put up very positive defensive stats,
yeah,
considering he played about a month.
Yeah.
Really. I think he got called up, at the end of August, maybe? And really, showed out defensively, was a spark plug for the team, hit over 300 in the short sample size that he had.
21 games.
21 games. Austin Hayes definitely deserves some kind of mention in this conversation, at least. He was exciting.
Interesting number about Alberto.
But I agree with you on Martin, especially, he'd never played above Double-A before the season. And a lot of young guys, if they're struggling at the plate, it reflects defensively. It never did for him.
Right, and the toughest position on the field, too, at shortstop.
Exactly. All right, this is going to be the toughest of all the awards. Reliever of the year. Ooh. The Orioles had the second worst ERA bullpen.
Yeah.
The worst belongs to the World Series champions, which I don't think that's ever happened.
Nope. Worst ERA entering the playoffs ever.
That's nuts. So not too many candidates to pick from here. I have to go with the guy who I believe had the lowest ERA in the bullpen, and that would be Michael Givens. Not a great year for him statistically when you look at his career numbers. A 4.57 ERA in 63 innings pitched. He converted 8 of his 11 save opportunities. The only number that really stands out that was a positive for him was his K per 9, a career high 12.3. So he was getting guys to swing and miss. However, he gave up some big hits in the process. And they kind of, a closer on a team that loses 100 games isn't terribly valuable. But when he was pressed into service, he did okay, not great. But by default, I have to give it to Givens.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's more of quantity was there.
Quantity
over
quality.
the call. Again, the 4.57 ERA, that is by all accounts usually bad for a reliever.
Yeah.
But it's just also a shame looking back at this bullpen and the names. We figured going into the season, this was going to be an area where the Orioles could really sell off. You guys got a Givens, a Castro, a Blyer, guys that have somewhat of a track record that could prove valuable to a team like the Nationals, who were looking to add bullpen help heading into the postseason. And I don't want to say they pitched their way out of tradability, but it ended up being where it takes 2 to tango. So they couldn't really find a match for some of these guys. Yeah, and for me, I'm kind of in the same boat. Givens, just because of how often he was called into service and how it sounds negative, but it could have been worse.
Yeah.
And the saves were there. The strikeout, the K per 9, that's impressive too. I think Orioles fans will fall into the trap of when they think of 2019 Michael Givens, they're going to think of all the times he struggled and kind of blew it, but don't sleep on there were times where he pitched well and he was very streaky this season. That might have been his downfall, where he would have a couple of good outings and then a couple of really bad outings. And that might be due to overuse. I don't know if this was his career high in appearances or anything, but it was a factor of Brandon Hyde needed someone to rely on consistently, and that happened to be Michael Givens more often than not, and it was just piling on. And just back to Hunter, if Hunter Harvey has a handful of more outings, this might be a different conversation. But the fact that he only pitched in 7 games as a rookie, you can't really give it to him just because, he looked great for 7 games, but expand that over, Michael Givens is 58, and we'll see what happens. So, to me, it's Givens too, just because while the numbers don't exactly show it, maybe outside the K per 9, but he's way more valuable than you would expect.
The positive with these last 2 awards is that there was a young guy at both of those spots who seems ready to win that next year. Whether it's Austin Hayes or Hunter
Waiting
Harvey.
in the wings.
Just needed more opportunities, and we'll get more opportunities next year, certainly. Final award, unless you can think of any others, Executive of the Year goes to Michael Elias. Just kidding. The silver...
How are you kidding? It better go to Michael Elias.
No, I know. It will. I don't think there was anybody else really up for debate. All right, Silver Slugger. I think it's got to go back to the first award. Trey Mancini wins it for me. He had was actually, I looked up some of his stats. Great with 2 outs. A great 2-out hitter this year. .333 average, 12 homers, 42 RBIs, and OPS over 1. And then in terms of his stats overall and where he fit into the American League picture, 14th in AL and OPS, 12th in RBIs, 18th in batting average, 21st in walks. So checked a lot of boxes. Didn't finish in the top 10 in the American League in any major statistics, but was statistically one of the 15 or so best American League hitters. To me, I got to give my Silver Slugger to him.
I think I would do the same. As I also recall one of our more recent with an asterisk podcast. We talked about how Trey Mancini's been hitting better than some of the bigger names and across the league, and more consistently. And man, that second half he had was just unbelievable. Like, think of where he was statistic-wise in July, and then he tore through August and September. Again, thought he was going to be on pace for like 40 home runs. The most, again, take out those two weeks, the most consistently dangerous bat in the lineup, and opposing teams, both opposing pitchers really had to attack this Orioles lineup with Trey Mancini in mind because he was looming, and you didn't want guys on base with him. The 2-out stat is also, that's like, for me, like a clutch stat.
Yeah.
And the fact that he was so clutch so often for this club is why he's my Silver Slugger as well.
The production dipping at months at a time was certainly an issue. His production was weirdly variant depending on the month. He had 2 months in which he hit over 350, including September, and 3 months when he hit under 250. So, he was awesome at times, struggling a little bit at the plate at times, but I think for a guy that had a lot on his shoulders coming into this season, he did pretty darn well.
And that's baseball. I mean, every player goes through that. So it's it's never going to be perfect. You're going to have your ups and downs. How does it level out? And he leveled out to be having a pretty darn good season.
So recapping our awards, MVP and Silver Slugger go to Trey Mancini. Cy Young, John Maines. Most improved, mine goes to Hanser Alberto. Mm-hmm. Comeback Player of the Year, I said Andrew Kashner. You had Hunter Harvey
and Austin Hayes.
/ Austin Hayes. Good call. Gold Glove Defensive Player of the Year, Bobby's was Richie Martin. Mm-hmm. Mine was Hanser Alberto. And then Reliever of the Year, Michael Givens.
I mean, maybe aside from Givens, think of all the names we just mentioned. Those are guys that can be staples for this team in the hand. Like you said that Baseball America article projecting the Orioles 2023 lineup.
I think so.
I mean, those are all, everyone we just mentioned could very well be a major factor in this organization, but in the next 5 years, 3 years, whatever it is. So, future's bright.
Future is bright.
I mean, these aren't, maybe except for Andrew Kashner was thrown around too, but him and Michael Givens, hope maybe he becomes a trade piece next season, but these are guys that are going to be your corner pieces for this rebuild moving forward.
Future is bright. Shout out also to the Delmarva Shorebirds for winning the MILB.com Team of the Year. Minor League Team of the Year. That's pretty impressive. 90 wins, more than any other team in minor league baseball. Future is certainly bright in Birdland. Our future is bright as well. We're going to keep podcasts coming through the coming weeks, leading up to winter meetings, which is weirdly around the corner all of a sudden.
Around the corner. It's less than a month away.
It is less than a month away.
We're leaving 4 weeks.
I'm packing my bags as we speak. It is going to be nice to get out to San Diego.
Yeah.
We'll spend the entire time indoors, so we will not experience the weather at all. But it'll be a good time. Probably a generally quiet offseason for the Orioles, but Michael Elias did mention on the Hot Stove show that they're looking for a veteran middle infielder potentially to sign, maybe bolster that group of VR. Maybe if he sticks around, he may not. He may be non-tender.
Trade piece.
He could be a trade piece as well, and Richie Martin. So they could be looking for a piece there. Other than that, Bobby, I don't know if there's any position that they're going to dip into the free agency to bolster.
Nah, we touched on this in, I think, on our last podcast too. It's like these guys, a lot of these players aren't going to have their true value, their most valuable, until July 31st. That's when teams are going to get desperate and, give you king's ransom for a reliever or a big bat off the bench, whatever it may be. So I expect Mike Elias to kind of hold on to these guys, except for if that middle infielder comes the perfect, has to be the perfect opportunity. We talked about how he didn't make too many trades during the middle of the season because he didn't get the perfect opportunity and the perfect trade. So I expect this to be kind of a quiet off season. I think they have some staff hirings they still need to address too, because they kind of cleared house toward the end of the season. So that could be something to look forward to. But I would say rest easy, Baltimore. Stick with us because any breaking news we'll cover it, obviously. But we'll be talking O's throughout the course of this the off season, even though it might be a little quiet.
Helps that you have a stellar football team.
Oh my God!
Across the street,
a possible MVP.
Yeah,
playing a quarterback. Good Lord.
Exactly. So Lamar Jackson wins our MVP for the 2019 Orioles. But that just about does it. For the MASN All Access Podcast, thank you to Amy Jennings, our producer. The MASN All Access Podcast is brought to you by Marymount University. Visit MarymountSaints.com to learn more about our student athletes and programs today. Like us, follow us everywhere. MASN Orioles, MASN All Access Podcast. He's Bobby Blanco. I'm Paul Mancano. We'll see you later.